If you're thinking about moving to another country, there are a lot of financial considerations. It's not just making sure you've got your passport and a credit card. It's bank accounts, exchange rates, banks, taxes. So what do you need to think about if you're considering a big relocation? Or if you've made one and you're in Australia now, what's the next step? That's this episode of Money and a Good Life. So what does it take to uproot your life and move overseas? My name's Stephanie Coombs and I'm here with my co-host Ryan Watson. Hello, Ryan.
Hi, Steph.
And Tribeca's Dan Nel. Hello to you both.
Hi, Steph. Hi, Ryan.
Dan.
So, Dan, the reason that we're talking to you about relocating, it's because you've recently done this. This is a process you're very intimately acquainted with. Tell us a bit about what brought you to Australia.
Yeah, I moved over Jan last year, but it's been a long time coming. For me, it was better opportunities, right? Or just different opportunities. I've lived in the same province my whole life, except for 1 year in London. And I thought about going somewhere else, moving somewhere else. And we kind of had a discussion and decided, well, if I'm going to be moving, why not move somewhere different? Totally different.
Very different to South Africa.
Yeah, 100% right. So Australia it was.
So were there many culture shocks when you first got here?
Yes. I don't think necessarily
Fast
culture.
yes on that one. Yes.
It's more that I don't say necessarily the culture is much different because that's one of the reasons we came over here. I mean, I know Australians like sport and like being outdoors, and South Africans were very similar when it came to that. It's rather how we interact with each other. South Africans, tend to be maybe a little bit more direct, I think. We say things as they are.
What? Which
for the record, I appreciate, Steph.
Yeah,
okay,
for the record.
that's good.
Dan and I,
100%.
2 piece.
Yes. But I mean, that was I would say probably the only thing that's really different.
One thing that stands out when you did arrive, Dan, how about going through a Coles checkout?
Yes, that was interesting. I had to, obviously, I mean, we don't have self-checkouts in South Africa. So when I got to Coles the first night, I wanted to buy myself, actually 6 beers, to be honest.
Totally fair, there's no judgment, yeah.
And got a few things, got to the counter and realized I have no idea how to check this stuff out. Because
embarrassing.
There's no
for
one
you.
there. We have people who check this out. We have people who pack the bags, and I was there, no one to help me. So I had to ask the nice person standing there on the end of the road.
And they were like, who's
out.
this simple fellow?
Yeah. Yes.
You know,
Well, simple, Steph. I've lived in Australia for 44 years and I still need the 15-year-old to help me navigate the checkout
guys,
as well.
this is really embarrassing for both of you. They couldn't be easier. Like they've got you press the screen, you know.
Yeah, but then your face is on the screen. There's people.
Too much pressure.
That's it. Yeah.
Too much pressure. Well, obviously moving to Australia, lot of logistics and things that come across from such a big move like that. Were there any expenses that you were surprised by, things that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, I tried to prepare my best, obviously financial planners, that's what we do, but there's consistently additional expenses that you don't necessarily prepare for, permanent residency application, visa costs, medical expenses. So there's, when moving to a different country, there's inevitably additional expenses.
And that was a key surprise, right, Dan? Obviously in terms of sponsoring process through Tribeca, but the costs really mount up, don't they? Something for this, something for that, immigration agent, lawyer and the like as well.
100% right. I didn't expect that I needed to do a new English test, for example, this year, but renewing my visa through Tribeca, I had to do another English test.
It's like you'd lost your English?
Yeah, all of a sudden.
Yeah,
I thought after I've spent
They didn't believe you.
a year and a half in Australia, I'd be better in English, but apparently they think I'm worse at English.
Sounds like Australian bureaucracy, doesn't it?
But also, are Australians the best example of spoken English?
Nah.
Probably not, eh?
But so, there's definitely additional expenses. And I do think we underestimate how expensive it can be to move, even myself.
The other thing that happens, like when you're moving countries, is that you Google anything like English test or immigration lawyer or whatever, and maybe 1 in every 20 searches is legitimate. But there are so many shysters out there trying to take your money. Yeah. Did you run into that?
I was lucky, and we did a bit of research before deciding to move to Australia, and an article I read referred me or specifically said, look for someone who's registered with the Australian authority. So that was something that I knew beforehand, to engage with an immigration agent or lawyer. I used a lawyer who was registered. And the thing is, Australia, you can do it yourself. You don't necessarily need an immigration agent, but you need to be aware that you're going to spend a lot of time going through those documents, filling them out, sending them through to the government. It takes time. It's going to take a lot of time.
And then if you fill in a form incorrectly and that's been put in the queue, then it's going to take time to get back. And then I presume you don't go back to where you were in the queue, Dan. You go back to the end.
And that's the thing. That's why we made a decision right from the start to use an agent-based, someone professional to assist with the application process, because the delay you can potentially cause yourself, it can set you back quite a while.
Always check out, I think most countries have pretty good government websites. They're so boring. So boring, but they do have the information that you do need. Would you, having gone through this process, is there something that you would do differently now?
Well, what I would propose people do is perhaps go and see the city you want to move to before you move. Listen, I'd never been to Melbourne before, and I like it.
That's a leap of faith.
It is a leap of faith. But I came over in 2019, I had a look at Sydney, had a look at Brisbane, thought of going to Brisbane, would have gone to the Gold Coast actually. And when I got the offered opportunity to work for Tribeca, I came to Melbourne without seeing the city. I was lucky. I loved it. But I know people and know a lot of, have friends who've moved to places where they've not been and haven't been happy.
Yeah, because if you were moving to Melbourne based off Surfers Paradise Gold Coast vibes, not the same.
Yeah, and it's because it's such a big thing, especially if you've got a family and kids and a wife. And I know people who came over to Melbourne and went back to South Africa because they just find that the work culture is different than South Africa, and they spend a lot of time at work. They're not necessarily prepared for that. So you would give up years of your life in your middle 30s, maybe early 40s, and then have to go back to South Africa because you realize it doesn't fit the life that you thought you'll have.
At what point do you double down and say, right, this is it, this is my home now? Like, do you have at the moment your feet in South Africa and also Australia, or have you sort of gone on one side of the fence?
Yeah, no, I'm here to stay. But
yeah,
well, I can't say that because I still have to get my permanent residency, depending on the Australian government. But the plan is to stay here. Look, my situation is a little bit different because I'm still licensed to provide advice in South Africa as well. So, and I'll maintain that license because the clients, my niche, the clients that I tend to serve better is expats, South African expats, and me being able to provide advice in South Africa as well is a big benefit for them, and I believe it is because I can help them with their finances on both sides of the country, of the water. But for other people, I think to make that decision that once you go over,
yeah,
I think it's an easier psychological move than to have that back door open.
Or otherwise, you have a foot in both camps. Yeah. No person's land.
No, 100% right. Yeah,
it's also difficult because then, like, you might be paying fees in different countries, and you're dealing with two administrational problems. You're dealing with two governments and two tax systems, and
yeah, you're going to have that for a while. Most countries do kind of limit you from financially immigrating all at once right after you move to a...
South Africa, three years, so is that right?
There's a few rules you have to be... Yeah. After you financially immigrate, for example, you have to wait 3 years before you can take your retirement funds, we don't call it superannuation, but your super out and move it to Australia. And different countries have different rules. So it's very important to understand when you can actually access those assets that you've saved up for your whole life in the country where you're from. And not everyone knows the rules, but there's a bunch of rules around.
And then, it's money isn't always worth the same in each country, obviously. So, like, what is an amazing retirement in one place may not be an amazing retirement fund in another place. And that's something that you need to consider too.
And this is a big challenge, isn't it, for South Africans immigrating down? Is it the rand to the Australian dollar?
Yeah, we're looking at about 12 rand to the dollar. So it is once you moved your money from South Africa, what you're able to buy here is not necessarily the same thing. You're not going to at 35 take your money out of your retirement fund after paying the taxes and then come and buy a $1.5 million place in Melbourne. So you need to plan a lot more carefully. And this is where I think most value, you can get a lot of expats get value from financial planning, is because you'll do those projections. How much do you need to put away, to retire comfortably? How much money do you need to put away to buy that first home? Even sometimes buying that first car.
And it's part of that commitment when you immigrate really to building a new life, right? So that's where financial advice fits hand in glove, and that's why you've chosen to make a niche in that, because you've walked in their shoes.
Yeah, and that's 100% right, Ryan. I've got a big passion in helping expats kind of navigate this process because it's such an emotional thing. I remember my first night, my whole transition. It is, you don't know what to expect, and then coupling that with uncertainties around your visa renewals, getting permanent residency. There's a lot of things already kind of in your back of your mind you're worrying about.
And just to that point, Dan, it's something that Steph and I would find hard to understand. But that uncertainty, a commitment that you've made to another country to immigrate, but then there's still some unsurety around whether you'll get permanent residency and the like as well. It's all good that everyone says it'll be okay, but it does play a bit on your mind, right?
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, we all know the effect that the worry has on your kind of your whole psyche, the way you interact with people around your life. And this is where I believe, and what I want to do is I want to help families when they come over here, because you already have the stress of being in a different place. You don't have the support network of moms and dads and aunts and uncles helping you out with the kids. Now you're in a different country, worrying about your finances. This is where we see where families really go through a tough time, because now who do you take that stress out on? You're working a lot of hours trying to build a new life in a new place, and you're not sure how your financial journey is going to pan out. And I think this is where we can help people, even if it's just doing some projections, showing them how long will it take you to actually save up for that first home.
And making sure that you've fully informed on the implications of
100% right.
Totally, moving countries and whatnot. Is there a checklist? I know we've gone through some of these things, but is there a checklist of financial considerations that people should actually go through and plot out?
Yes, I think there's obviously, as you transition, there's some things that you need to prepare for at the start. So having enough liquid assets available for expenses like paying that bond when you first come over here, paying for things like if you want to move or bring furniture or personal effects over, allowing for that. That first car. If you're, for example, in a 2-year short-skilled visa, you can't get a car loan because you need at least 2 years. And as soon as you land here, you're on 1 day short of 2 years, so you need to buy a car cash. There's some of these things that you need to consider. Obviously, it's different for different people because there's different visa classes out there. But that's why you need to plan a lot more carefully around how much money do I have, how much will I be able to bring over, and what do I want to do of that?
And it's good as well to understand your career trajectory too, because it changes so much. I'm media, of course, but a lot of Australians have amazing media experience, and then they do that thing that all Australians do and go to London. And they expect all this amazing work that I've done will be recognised.
Don't you know who I am?
Yeah, don't you know who I am? I was the head of this department and I did this TV show, and they're like, that's great. Can you go get me a coffee? And you'll say, yes, please. Sorry, thank you. It just doesn't at all translate.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, Steph, and it's certainly Dan's story to tell, but from where Dan was in South Africa and running the family financial planning business, and then with education in Australia, I don't want to say you had to take a couple of steps, but it was a challenge. It's your story, Dan.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think most immigrants would say that you take 1 or 2 steps back to be able to take a lot of steps forward. Ryan, you mention studying. That's another expense that I had to go through, and some people need to go through. I needed to do 4 additional modules at uni just to get up to standards for the Australian requirements. So that's in rands a ridiculous amount of money, because you're looking at $3,000 per module. Those are the type of things. And then, like you said, you take a few steps back. So the initial few years, you might earn a little bit less than what you're used to. And even with that, we see, stats show that immigrants save on average more than Australians. And for example, to give you an idea, it differs from country to country. People who move over here, the UK residents, I believe, the highest per capita savers from immigrants. And then South Africans, who are the 7th largest immigration population in Australia, save the 2nd most money per person. So and there's obviously a lot of reasons for that, right? So depending on where you're coming from, you might have no social network or safety net back in the country where you're from. So you're like, I have to save. Like people joke about South Africans, we take out insurance like it's nobody's business because we know there's no public health system that you necessarily can rely on. So you need trauma cover, you need total and permanent disability cover. You take out life cover because that's succession planning.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of things like that.
Well, I live in Bondi and people save there by British backpackers being about 7 to 8 people to a room.
Okay.
And that's one way of doing it. Like
Sounds
you're not paying rent, you're paying a fraction of the rent.
Sounds cozy.
Very cozy.
Surely then you'd have adverse medical bills off the back
yes.
of it.
Oh, yes. We won't go into the medical bills or the reasons those people seek treatment.
Good.
But yeah, they should get some insurance.
Yeah.
But another thing that people sort of underestimate, I think, sometimes is the impact of moving countries and then losing the family support network too, because like you rely, if you've got kids as well, you rely on the parents and the in-laws to help take. And suddenly it's just you haven't got a network of people to help when things go bad. And that means that you've got to pay for help and nannies and schools and all sorts of like... It can add up.
It definitely does. And I think that's what I've found with clients, young kids moving to Australia. The one thing that all of them say, it's just, and we know this, Australians know this as well, how expensive it is to take care. Any kind of after-school assistance is expensive. And that's why we find that a lot of people, when they immigrate, they right from the start plan for one of the partners not working. It's just too expensive for them to, especially at the start, for both people to work and put the kids into daycare.
And I think a lot of people as well who I speak to who are new to Australia have found that though you get holidays in Australia, you're spending those holidays getting on a plane, flying back to see your family, and you don't ever really get a proper holiday. Have you felt that? Is that a problem with you?
I was actually lucky. Before I came over, I made the commitment that I'll go back to South Africa quite often.
Yep.
My dad is a little bit older, and once you move overseas, you kind of realize that if I go back home, for example, once every 2 years, I might have 7 or 8 more times to see my dad. Right?
Yeah.
So you kind of make immediately, and that's kind of a conversation or decision that you need to make as an immigrant. It's like, am I going to spend that money to go see the people that I love back home? So for me, it's part of my budget. I put it out. I've made a decision. And that's fine. And I was lucky. I went back December for nearly 5 weeks, Ryan.
Yeah, that was great.
It was amazing. And I go back and I spend the time there. And I'll be going next year, May, June, probably again for a few weeks. And you just make that commitment. You make that financial decision that it's fine.
It's also probably more quality time in some ways because like you're not working, like you just get to focus on hanging out and being with your family.
And I mean, we're fortunate as well with video calls and stuff. These days, there's no, like in the old days, you have to write a letter. I can just, and my mom, I mean, she, for example, joked about it this Sunday. We speak every Sunday. My dad and my mom, we have a bit of a conference call every Sunday. And she said, listen, I have to go somewhere, so we can't have our regular catch up. So luckily these days, it's a bit easier to stay in touch.
It is because like it used to be as well, every time you picked up the international phone, you had those huge delays.
And the expense.
And like ding, 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 ding. Yeah, so expensive.
And your brother? He doesn't live in
the Netherlands.
He lives in the Netherlands.
So he's in the Netherlands. He also immigrated. So he's up north. He's lucky. He's lucky he's got kids. So when my folks go overseas, they're going to him.
That's it. That's the problem. Yeah.
Because it's a lot easier.
There's a hierarchy. They love you all equally, but your parents do love the ones who've had the grandkids a bit more, I found.
100% right. So they're going to visit him.
There's still time. There's still time for another time, Steph.
Yeah.
You all say that.
Yeah, I've noticed this with my parents as well. Like Jeremy, my brother, he's the only one with 2 kids.
Okay.
Where did they move closer to? Not to this guy. No. The grandkids.
Exactly.
They're pretty cute, though. They're pretty cute. We'll give them that.
But you can give them back. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Precisely. That's the ticket. So what are the tax implications of moving to Australia? Like, is that something that you need to consider as well?
Very much so. Countries differ. So from country to country, there's different rules. And I can only speak to South Africa at this point in time. But there's a lot of rules around, not just the tax that you have to pay, for example, taking money out of your retirement products, but also the cost involved in bringing the money over. Forex, I mean, I speak to to clients often about this. We don't give specific advice around Forex, but there are costs that they need to be aware of. So we generally put people in touch with other trusted professionals, people that we work with, to help them to bring their money over here. Because being aware, for example, around costs associated with foreign exchange it's such a big thing. If you're moving over, $100,000.
You don't think about it when you're going on holiday and you're getting, a few $100 as spending cash. But if we're talking big money, then you can lose.
Yeah, so that makes a big difference. So that's tax is one thing, additional expenses is another. And then how often you send money back to the country that you're from as well. There's also a lot of costs that you need to consider there as well.
Yeah, because sometimes you do have to support family as well who are not in your country.
So, and I think that's something that sometimes people underestimate is how much it costs to send money back to the country where you're from. And a lot of us do that, in countries where economic circumstances differ from the one in Australia. And most of Australians, and in Australia, it's a good country economically, and we're all very lucky to be here. So people underestimate what it costs to send money back to the people that they love. Yeah.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for sharing your hard-earned insights. Appreciate it very much. And thank you very much for listening. If you like this episode and you want more good money advice, do make sure you follow this podcast wherever you're listening now. And we'll see you next time. Advice given in this podcast is general in nature and is not intended to influence decisions about investing or financial products. Our listeners should always seek their own professional advice that considers their own personal circumstances before making any financial decisions.